So this is where we are. Lovely day for it. Lovely cup of sugar beet just there. The sun is very welcome. So we've got Wednesday morning start of our Agrii iFarm event. Hope you enjoy this update. Thanks very much for watching. We've got about 100 people here, I think, who are coming. They're still rolling up here as well. So thanks very much for watching this video, and any questions about any of the trials you see, then please ask. Just before we get into this update, just want to touch on two things. The Seals event, if you are planning on going to the Seals event, that you can use this discount code where you can get 50% reduction in your ticket. So please use this code. And also, just before we get started in the iFarm, I just want to touch on another charity tractor run. So this tractor run is to raise further awareness in mental health in agriculture, and particularly it's also in memory of Alec Newlove, a young farmer from Louth who really sadly is no longer with us today. And it's a tractor run organised by Lincolnshire farmers. It's going right around the coast of the UK, around about 4,700 miles in total. It's setting off from Cleethorpes Pier at 9 AM on Monday the 10th, that's next Monday, and it's ending at the Lincolnshire Show on the 19th of June at the Peacock and Binnington stand. There is a Facebook page to highlight it. It's called Back British Farming and Mental Health. So if you look at that, you'll find it. There's 14 drivers taking part. They're driving around 17 hours a day to get round it. They might drive longer if they're getting behindhand. And Tom, who helps me and drives our 8RX, is doing the Inverness to John O'Groats route, which is about 343 miles. And all the proceeds from this will go to the Farm Safety Foundation, and it will support the Yellow Wellies campaign and also the Mind Your Head campaign. So really good charities and really good worthwhile cause, and it's particularly aimed at the young people in agriculture. So please support this. If you see it going around the UK, it'd be really good to throw some money in the bucket. I'm actually putting the link for this in the description of this video, and so please look at that if you want to donate. So it's a Just Giving link. So thanks very much for this, and please, if you see it, give it a toot and give it some support.
We've got this banner of Green Horizons, which Amy and Lucy will talk about a bit later on. But you know, we believe as Agrii and as a distributor, as a business, of which some of that we get back from manufacturers. We probably get just over £1 million back from manufacturers for some of the seed breeding that we do, some of the variety stuff that's under secrecy agreement, etc., etc. So we do get some money back, but we are heavily invested, and we continue to invest in that as we move forward. We've got 45,000 plots, so we are an accredited trials iFarm. So it says we've got over 20. I think we've got 24 iFarms across the whole country. It is a big cost. It's a big investment. In fairness, we probably are looking to scale that back a little bit. We'll still have 15 or 16 next year, I guess, and obviously this is going to still continue. And we just want, with Andrew's permission, of course, and you know that.
Conflict there, but I put an example together of cover cropping, and we did some work at Stoneonga, which Andrew mentioned earlier, around looking at how much can you earn from a carbon market for putting a cover crop in the ground versus doing nothing. And the answer was £21 a hectare, because you're getting approximately just north of half a credit for cover cropping. So last year, that was valued at £21 a hectare for doing a cover crop. Under SFI, that's all changing slightly now, but the same thing still applies, that you can get £129 a hectare for a cover crop. So combining those two together, simply for cover cropping alone, you can actually start earning back what you're putting into the ground for cover cropping. Now, water companies are also offering some schemes around cover crops as well. I'm not too sure particularly what's happening in this area, but being from Shropshire, I know Severn Trent was certainly offering these sorts of schemes earlier on, where they're paying farmers to cover crop for helping to reduce soil erosion.
Launched back in the autumn. I just want to start off by putting this quote up, because I think it's a really nice quote, in that the advance of technology is based on making it fit so that you don't even really notice it, so it's part of everyday life. And I think that's where technology should fit and should sit, in that you're using technologies as your everyday farming working practices, and you're not even really thinking about it.
and so the pressure remains. There is still an awful lot of people out there that are suffering hard, and some of you will know what I'm talking about. Crop bags I mentioned earlier on have gone from 185 to 205, 210 pounds a tonne for wheat. I'm assuming everything else is folded up. Now, if you take all the costs together and divided by the expected yield, and that gives you a cost of production. Is that figure correct at any point in time? Well, it's correct when you do it, but from then on it's going to change because it's only a budget. But believe me, gentlemen, a budget is better than no budget. A forecast is better than no forecast. So my forecast for 2024, when everything was going smoothly, 155, 160 pounds a tonne for producing a 10-tonne crop of wheat. Okay, the selling price of that crop was 185, so I'm making 25 pounds a tonne out of that, which on a farm that was producing somewhere in the region of 3,000 tonnes of grain is going to give me a sort of, it's not really enough, but it's a positive profit. Let's just think about it over time. Before you do anything, before you actually start producing the next crop of the year, you've got that fixed proportion growth phase that isn't going to go away. So that's somewhere in the region of £45 a tonne that you're going to have every year, regardless of what you're actually doing. £185 a tonne for wheat, is that a good price or a bad price? It's £25 a tonne over the cost of production. So, it is what it is. Let's just have a look at that now on the basis that we've had a 15% reduction in yield. It's been a pretty awful autumn. Is 15% enough? Well, let's hope it's enough. That figure hasn't changed, that's still 45, but actually after planting, with a 15% reduction, we're now north of £135 per tonne invested in that crop. And when that gets through the harvest, we're up to 180, so realistically, if we had prices where they were this time last year, forecast for 2024, we're talking about making £5 a tonne. We're doing better than that today. Reminder of everything that you actually really knew, but from my perspective, I spend my entire life staring at computer screens. I spend talking to farmers more often than not, trying to make this thing make sense, and that's looking back where we are. £35 a tonne on a 3,000 tonne output is 90,000 quid. That's an awful lot of money. This is the bit that we have to get right. This is AHTP data that all you have to do is turn the computer on, press a couple buttons, and it'll turn on the screen for you. Believe me, I've got a shortcut to it on my page. You need this information, guys. It's available. Well, if you were looking at that in March and saw that trend, you've got to be selling somewhere on that line. Okay? Marketing 101. You sell into a rising market. You ask anybody who's got nothing to do with farming about when you sell stuff and you sell into a rising market. 855 for this year. You can see that there's quite a lot of blue above the red line, that we know that there's a profit in there for it. We can do the same thing for the spring crops. These are again slightly further ahead. I get increasingly less accurate. Obviously, as you go the further forward you go, so more of the costs change. Earned from SFI crop. Okay. Very, very little risk in doing this, like zero or next to zero. But also, it's nothing like the gross margins of growing decent spring crop. And you can see that actually we are looking at a gradual increase in gross margin over that period of time for most of the cereal crops. The red crops a lot more variable. The grey line in the middle is 2023, that 1 year when everything went out completely out of kilter. It was nice out of kilter, but went out of kilter. So if you sort of ignore that, you can see a nice upward trend in that. So from my perspective, from very much a first look, guys, I haven't done this in detail yet. This is my first quick gloss over to get some figures out.
Say look, that's everything that I'm saying, and then we're moving on to SFI 2024. So what's the difference? So everything that was available in 2023 is going to be available in 2024, but there are actual changes, which I'll run through in a minute. There's now 104 actions which are going to be available, and what's really important to know is now this is the environmental offering that we are getting.
So that's it, we've finished inside now, so we're now heading outside. Just going to look at the plots and the wheat, the sugar beet, and also there's a desangos adjuvant nozzle application technology.
That's compressor, perfect timing. So what we've got there then, that's the kind of coverage that you'll get with a plot sprayer. So you can see there, I mean, with the UV dye, we would have been able to show it quite nicely on the plants, but unfortunately we can't do that just at the moment. It possibly is a bit more. So you've got really, really good coverage. Now, what's interesting, of course, is what we then go and do on farm. Now, it may not be exactly as you would do on farm, but I've got a fairly typical application on here. I'm going to be using a Billericay 03 nozzle, so the bubble jet nozzle. We're going to be at 2.5 bar, and we're going to be at 11 kilometres, which gives 120 litres per hectare. Okay. Right. So this line here will be just water. It's going to be, like I say, 2.5 bar, and we'll be doing 11k. So you'll see the difference, hopefully. Just on time. Cool. A little bit quicker, yeah. And actually, I mean, I suspect there'll be a few that possibly even go faster than that. Actually, 11k is, you know, if you've got a food registration, this is then what you tend to subject them to. So you can see there is quite a difference on the amount of droplets that you've got on that paper. And actually, to be honest, the paper shows droplets up far better than actually plants do. When you've got a living surface like a plant, you tend to find that droplets will also bounce off. They will obviously miss that target a lot easier. This not only is this getting the droplet that's hitting the paper, when you spray over with nozzles, you'll find those finer ones just linger a little bit and then steadily drop. Those are the ones that out in these sort of conditions, you'll actually lose some of those as well. So there's the difference. So this is why we say, yeah, great, okay, this gives us something for adjuvants to play with. The other thing that's important with this is, for years, and I was one of them, we got a little bit sceptical about adjuvants, because when you put them through trials, if I was to stick an adjuvant with that, quite honestly, I'm not really going to improve the coverage. There's other things adjuvants will bring, so you might get more penetration if you're looking at herbicide, but generally speaking, when it comes to coverage, you're not really going to improve that very much. Notice that the boom height here is set really for those ears, because that's what we're trying to demonstrate, so it's a bit of a misrepresentation of the leaves at the okay. So if it's even darker, the UV light reflects even better still. So yeah, and normally you can see it in the ears.
So what's this one with?
This is just water.
Right, yeah, but the nozzle.
Oh, this is the Billericay 03. It's 2.5 bar, so 120 litres per hectare. So you've got nice coverage down on the leaf.
Yeah.
But if you compare that to what I showed you with the O2 nozzle that you'd be doing a plot spray, yeah, this is quite nice on that.
That's a good one.
That's why I've done it like this, because I've had a feeling it would show. And it's quite nice. You guys can probably see that at the front there, hopefully as well, yeah. Okay.
Regardless of whatever. So what I've got here is I've got a few examples from the trials to show you. So you might be obvious, but this is the untreated. So this is zero nitrogen. We'll be able to measure how much nitrogen's in the grain, how much was in the soil, and we can see how much nitrogen the crop actually pulled out of the soil. This is our farm standard. So 220 kilos of nitrogen or something like that, applied to the crop without looking. So this has had nitrogen and sulfur, because very quickly we wanted to make sure that sulfur wasn't a limiting factor, so we went in with a liquid ammonium sulfate formulation that gave us 50 kgs of SO3. It was a little bit of a fire brigade treatment, but certainly pulled the crop back round. But what I wanted to highlight to you here is this is the same amount of nitrogen but no sulfur. Okay, so you can really see, I mean actually it looks a lot better than what it looked like when we went into the crop a couple of months ago. But ultimately what we want to look for with sulfur deficiency is the deficiency will occur on the youngest leaf. So that last leaf, you will see the deficiency. And still, if you want to pick leaves off, by all means, you can see when you hold it up to the lights, that leaf is very pale green, the plant is stunted, and also we've got other deficiencies as well occurring within the plants. But ultimately that sulfur is going to hold the crop back, but also we're going to have a little bit of data from that to understand, you know, the NS interaction between treated and untreated. So it is well worth still testing the crops at this late stage to see how much nitrogen and sulfur is in the leaf, and that may influence your decision making around, do I go in with a foliar nitrogen that contains a form of nitrogen and a form of sulfur in the mix as well. So, but this, if you can see this through the drone imagery, this is our farm standard nitrogen rate with no sulfur. Looking really poorly. Now, sulfur in the leaf, low. Well, we can see it with the naked eye before we can actually test it. So I think you know, it's well worth picking up on these things, particularly with this weather patterns we get now, where we get lots of rainfall, lots of loss of very soluble nutrients through the soil. The other thing I wanted to talk about was actually the zero N test, because we often talk about nitrogen, and some people think nitrogen is a friend or a foe to us in terms of what it does. But actually, just to highlight, the crop grown in this position with no nitrogen, when we actually do the leaf test at the same time as the sulfur test, how deficient it is in other micronutrients as well. So it just highlights how that nitrogen helps maintain a micronutrient balance in the plant that we don't actually account for. Okay, it's not influencing per se the micronutrients, but what it is influencing is the health of the plant, and if that plant's healthy, it's going to pull up micronutrients. So I'm looking at these. So I've told you we've got an untreated. We also have a farm standard 100 kgs of nitrogen followed by 100 kgs of nitrogen. But then also we have a farm standard where we've applied all the nitrogen in one pass. We then also have, well, what happens if we actually add a product called LiquidSafe? Now LiquidSafe is a urease and nitrification inhibitor for liquid fertilisers. Works to keep nitrogen stable in periods of high rainfall. It stops nitrogen gassing off from the urea proportion in the liquid fertiliser. The other treatments we've looked at is some what I would call novel nitrogen products to help assimilation of nitrogen. So the product here, which I call PlantWorks, is a family of bacterial end-fixing bacterial communities that help with freeing up and fixing nitrogen for the growing plant. We're looking at a whole variety of different situations here, but I thought, you know, the interesting thing was what caught us by surprise was, well, it shouldn't have caught us by surprise really, but how bad sulphur's been. And
so that has looked at the application technology. We've heard Tom talking about fertilisers. Now heading to the sugar beet, you can see we've got a big team here, and we're looking at the herbicides and also the different establishment systems. But it is very cold here, you wouldn't think it is June. So that is the untreated. You can just see the broadleaf weeds there.
Grass weed control's not so good. The ethofumicate has benefited from the addition of the soil there, and so you've lost the level of control on the grass weed. And also, it's not just that you've lost the level of control, you're also seeing the weeds are further on, so there hasn't even been a check in terms of development. So what you're really seeing, I think the stats from the trial tell us that there's sort of a 20% difference in terms of weed level. When you take that oil out of the post-stem applications, you lose a lot of control potentially from the actual standard program.
How much oil did you have on?
70. It was 0.75 for the toil, and that was with all 3 applications. Yeah. This is the standard program, which is just there, but you can see the standard program, great weed control, but we have a little bit of drop back in terms of the figure of the crop. Now this is a humic this product has a standard program with the oil, but it's also had a humic added into it. So we've added in 2 applications of a humic product, Blackjack Black Gold, that we've started using over the last couple of years. That product has shown really well in terms of trials. It's not for crop safety. The benefit is around early rooting and access to nutrition. So the humics improve the nutrition. So that's applied at 2 litres per hectare pre-em and then 2 litres post-em here. When you put that in with the standard program.
So this is the strip cultivation areas. You can see the beet's not as forward as the cultivated area, and there are a few gaps in it. This was the Amazon that you saw last week. It did our beans. Good.
The Amazon was here, which we're going to go and have a look at in a bit. And then the farm drill was a Vardistat temper.
So, just to talk about it a bit more. So the variety was,
This was a farm variety, so it's farm variety across the piece here. It was drilled on the 12th of April. The strip till work was done the day before on the 11th of April. So I'll come on to that in a bit. And the farm cultivations, the Simba Solo was done on the 8th, and then the Power Harrod was on the day of drilling. So actually behind me here, you can probably tell between the strip till work and the farm farm standard, actually the strip till doesn't look that promising really. It doesn't look as we'd expect.
Frankie's eating the demonstration plants.
Sugar beets being established. But the other thing to remember with this is it's all about establishment and establishment cost. So the cost of doing the traditional method would obviously be more than the strip till. So at the end of the day, it's what the figure at the bottom of the bowl.
And also you've got to think about maybe what's this doing to our weed pressure. Have we got slightly less weed? Can we maybe think about using a hoe, or can we use a slightly different herbicide, less herbicide program? So one thing I will say, this was just strip tilled for once the day before drilling. We'll come on to that. Ideally, the work that I've done and these guys there have done as well is you need to go in a couple of times. So for example, maybe a month before and then slightly closer to drilling, or even on slightly different land you can maybe do your strip tilling in autumn, even establish a cover crop and then come back in and refresh. You kind of want to get that air into the soil and loosen up, create the tilth, but then give it time to settle so you've got the tilth, and then just come back in and freshen it up. So we're restricting growth here above and below ground in the strip till setting compared to the conventional setting. So it's just something we're going to explore. This is all kind of trials. This is why
that's the standard.
That's the farm standard, and that's with the Coons Dryger. Definitely restricting growth here, but like I say, that might be because of the conditions for this year, the fact that we've only gone in once. But it's just kind of, this is why we do these trials, so we can understand how best to use these machines and how best to implement them.
Just going to run you through the strip till. So strip till wise, we do width wise anything from 3 metre up to 6 metre in row centres of 45 centimetres up to 75 centimetres. We've got our front cutting disc, which allows you to cut the trash and just to cut out a slot for the leg to come through. Following on from the disc here, we have our on this machine we've got an auto reset. We can also do that in shear bolt as well, depending on how much soil movement you want from the machine. Moving back onto the machine here, we've got our catching discs, which we can move backwards and forwards on the go depending on soil conditions to allow that soil flow to come through the machine. Further back onto the machine, we've got our cultivation discs. We can move these up and down. We can get as much pressure on there as you want really, just to cultivate that strip. And then following on from that, we've got a zonal gutler roller, which just finishes that strip off ready for drilling. Generally we are finding, just going off of yourself, we are finding that on heavier land you'll probably have to go through possibly in the autumn to just create a strip, and then possibly go through in the spring just to freshen it up again.
So you can see the line through here where the strip cultivation finishes and the standard cultivation carries on, and the standard cultivation is a Simba Solo followed by the Para Harrow that we did this year. You can just see the difference.
And it really does then start to help justify that investment in such a machine. Very sort of simple and easy to do. The main difference then is obviously the singling disc. So this disc here is still in from when we drilled the baked beans a couple of weeks ago. But we obviously do a multiple of from anything from a 1 mil hole for oilseed rape up to sort of a 5-6 mil hole then for sunflowers. The pressure system then, so we're blowing that seed onto the disc. As it gets them round to the seed, then we're firing down a very, very short tube.
So that's putting the cover crop in or fertiliser.
It's very, very quickly in the floor. I've lifted this wheel up here then, so as you can see then behind
That's showing inside the metering unit.
Press wheel then, and that's what's catching that seed and pressing it into the furrow then to try and ensure that sort of maximum soil to seed contact. We then follow then traditionally then, like we see here then with the press wheels then, they're just sort of pressing that soil in and around. I think it's interesting here, if you look across some of the plots here, you can see occasionally it's a little bit slotty where it hasn't necessarily had enough soil to bring back in, and in that sort of situation then we could add an additional section in there of some closer discs, and there are some actual like sort of mini cultivation discs, and they're actually just going to bring that bit of soil back on top then to ensure then that we don't end up with that sort of season slot.
One group leaving Tom, talking about fertilising, now going to look at the SFI crops.
Go away.
So now, last thing we haven't seen are the wheat trials. That's Poppy, that's daughter Sam's dog, the yellow lab. That grass needs pulling, thank you dogs. We are going to, another one there. A few here. We are starting pulling blackgrass next week. This field is some that I know it has got some into. We are going to have to be very careful and do this very slow, and we'll probably end up doing this twice. So these are the wheat varieties, and this is the untreated side here. You can see when you're walking down here, untreated against treated down the next line. These are the various varieties. If anybody wants to have a look at these and come another day when they're out in here, have a look at any other trials we're doing, please get in touch and I'll happily show you. Just actually while I'm walking down here, then people who watch this channel that aren't farmers, you can just see the amount of varieties we have to choose from, all different characteristics, different yields.
But you have to be aware of that. Some of these other varieties, the inciters and the craniums, we still have to sell about 500 tons of these varieties. They have always been high input, which is great. You know you can't mess around, but they are still some of the best varieties for the very light land and the very late.
Just showing here, this is untreated here.
This didn't quite make it
Here.
to the RL trial. It was like
We'll go along here. Compared to that, so those two leaves. So the leaf on the left has had no fungicides for disease at all. The one on the right's had 3.
Big fan of the RL. It is no disease, it's pure genetic performance. Our trials are in a farm situation with farm programs, and when you get a year like this, actually what comes top is some of the strongest genetic packages. So much so are we enthused and positive about this variety. We've had a few hundred tons every year. If we've sold a few more tons, then we've actually had to downgrade some high grade, but we actually have enough high grade production to be looking at 1,500 tons of availability next autumn, and there's about 500 tons of availability this. So I think this could be a really useful variety, even though it's not on the recommended list. Hope you had it any here, and I will not just bet a bottle of wine, I'll bet a case of wine that this one will be the highest yielding. So,
you hear that, everybody?
Obviously the likes of Dawson, incredibly popular. I think Dawson will do it. I think one of the feedbacks we had in the last few years is, oh, some of these varieties are a bit dirty than I thought they will be. Please bear in mind that a lot of the trials and things are drilled second week of October. That has a direct impact on the disease pressure that is on those trials. You take some of these varieties and start drilling them in September, and both RL data and Agrii data is a reduction in 0.3 of a score for every week. So you start drilling 20th of September and you've taken 0.9 of a disease resistance score off of some of these varieties. It might be a 6 and a bit, guess what? You've now made it a 5. So some of this stuff, 6s are the starting point for disease resistance, I think, this year, and actually we should be looking to build higher and higher. I think what you will find this year, brown rust is astronomical. My figures on seed sales were about 41% of the seed sown last year was less than 4.5 of brown rust. So we're quite exposed in varieties that way. And I think you'll find that Dawson's brown rust is a wee bit better, and actually that will probably see it through this year. One of those varieties that's quite slow, so both it and Typhoon, over the last few years, a lot of agronomists going, will this thing ever bloody grow? Really slow to move in the spring, what you'd probably call traditional early drillers. For me, that's actually a superpower rather than a weakness.
So this group are now going through the into the other field to look at the sugar beet trials that we've already seen. Most important part now of the day, finished with lunch. Really good morning we've had, good turnout, lots of chat, lots of talk. That's the most important thing. And also we have our Polaris up here as well, if anybody's interested in them. This is where we get it from. We're just borrowing this at the minute while ours is having a service. So that's it. Everybody's now been fed. People are just starting to leave. Really good morning we've had. So that's the end of this Agrii iFarm for another year. Here, the summer one, new venue up at the Heath Farm on the light land, where we've got the sugar beet and lots of different crops you've seen. Hope you've enjoyed it. Saw some of you who followed the video, so thanks for that. Great for you to come up and say hello and have a natter and a catch up. And hope you've enjoyed the content of this. Any questions, please come back with them and I'll do my best to answer them. Otherwise, we'll see you as always 8 AM Sunday morning.